Yeah, monopoly is a harsh mistress. So this is like this is a lot of chapters in a row here. We'll break it into two tests. It's 4 chapters. So 3 and 4 will be 1 unit. And it's ecology. So what do you know? Tell me about ecology. What's ecology, the study of? The word root doesn't help much. Of course, ology is the study of. The eco comes from the Greek oikos for house. It's not the study of houses exactly. Nithya? Okay. Yeah, what's an ecosystem? Yeah.
Is it like a bunch of living organisms that are different?
Yeah, the ecosystem is the living organisms, but also the non-living stuff in an area. Yeah. Just animals?
Living things.
Okay, I like it. That's pretty close. This is all about interplay. It's all about interaction with each other and with their environment. Which the problem is that ecology sounds kind of touchy-feely, science light, and it is not, I promise. The actual ecologists that I have known and worked with have been pretty much the smartest people all around that I have known. And it's because ecology is so many different sciences wrapped into one. It's really hard to do it justice at this level, because to be a good ecologist, you have to have years and years and years of all different kinds of science training. I'll do my best to give you a sense of the difficulty without killing it. And today's project that we'll start will give you a sense of some of that complexity. We're going to start with a couple of important concepts in ecology, starting with diversity, which is one of those words that gets thrown around a lot in regular talk. What do we mean in regular talk when we say diversity?
Different.
Specifically when we're saying it in like normal human conversation. It's quite the buzzword, yeah. I mean, come on, you guys know what adults mean when they talk about diversity, right? Selene? Yeah, people, right? Different types of people, different races, different ethnicities and cultures, and all that. And absolutely, that's a great thing. It's not exactly what it means in ecology. In ecology, it strictly means a number of different species, a number of different groups of organisms in an area. Number of different species in an ecosystem. And kind of the rule of thumb that is pretty strong across the board in ecology is this. Higher diversity, in other words, more different species in an ecosystem, means that ecosystem is healthier. I want you to think about why that might be. Probably helps to define what we mean by healthy ecosystem. That's pretty abstract. Here's what we mean by a healthier ecosystem. A healthier ecosystem is better able to survive disturbance. Why would a more diverse ecosystem be better able to survive a disturbance? What do you think?
Thinking like food webs, as the species gets wiped out, there's like a ton more species that like the whatever predator can go to.
Okay, so if there's lots of diversity in prey species, if one gets wiped out, there's others that the predators can adapt to. Okay, that'll work. What else?
The same plants or animals. And so if one species eats, if there's a lot of one species and they all eat a certain type of plant, then that plant will be a low amount of that plant.
So you're saying kind of the opposite of what, or the converse of what he's saying, that if there's low diversity of food and it gets one species gets wiped out, there won't be. Go beyond just food webs. I know you know food webs. That's great. What else? Why is diversity better? Why is more species better? There might be more symbiotic relationships. Okay. Why is that? Why is that healthier?
Together and benefiting each other.
Okay. But what about the whole disturbance thing?
Like there's different species of organisms, like some have adapted to the disturbances, they can withstand them.
I like it. We're pretty much there. Sam, what were you gonna say? And when we talk about adaptation, usually we don't mean like something that you grow to adjust to a situation. When we talk about evolutionary adaptations, I like the way he said it, that are adaptive. If you have a super high diversity and something bad happens, as an ecosystem, you're more likely to have some animals and plants and fungi and bacteria that are already adapted to survive that disturbance. You guys know about, I think it's the pinyon pine tree and forest fires? Because a forest fire is a pretty solid disturbance in an ecosystem, right? Like that's gonna wipe things out. Not much survives a forest fire. Maybe some bacteria in the soil. You still have soil at least for stuff to grow back in. But not this one tree. Do you know about the tree? Tell me.
California, the heat of the fires actually makes the pine cones open.
Yeah, I didn't know the sequoias did that. I think there's a couple of different trees. But yeah, so conifers, right? They have their seeds in their cones. And typically the cones, when they mature, the little scales open out and the seeds come out. Not the sequoia, not the pinyon pine. They just hang on to them until there's a fire. And it's actually the fire and only the fire that will make that pine cone bust open and actually release its seeds. Think about how brilliant that is, especially if you're a tree that lives a really long time. You can wait, right? And you can wait because when the forest fire happens, you're going to be the only one that gets to replant itself right away. And so you get this immediate advantage of being the one to grow back first, especially if it takes you a long time to mature. That's a big advantage. So the more diverse an ecosystem, the more likely that when a terrible disaster happens, when a disturbance happens, you've got something like the sequoia that is totally adapted to survive that disturbance. Because if you got low diversity and you don't have anything that survives, you're starting from scratch, right? So that's the idea, is that the more different types of critters, the more likely that at least some of them are going to make it if something bad happens. Which is a super central concept more and more in ecology because, and we'll talk way more about this in chapter 6, but basically we can say that just about every ecosystem on Earth has been disturbed to some degree by us. We are what we are. We are a species that is proliferating, getting very densely populated on this planet. We need certain things to live, and we like certain things. And that directly affects almost every ecosystem on Earth. And so understanding concepts like this and understanding the interactions helps us figure out how to help them survive and maybe even recover, because we very much depend on those ecosystems for our existence. Ecological research is hard for a lot of reasons. One of them is to really understand an ecosystem requires experiments. Really understand anything. And it's hard to experiment on a whole ecosystem, at least without hurting it, right? Change a variable in an ecosystem, you don't know what's going to happen. It's scary. And then there's these ecosystems where a variable is already changing, like, for example, average temperature on this planet, and we want to know what that's going to do in the future, well, it's hard to do an experiment on that, right? So what we're left with in ecology lots of times is modeling, mostly computer type modeling. Not, this is math, okay? Not, this is by ecosystem models, I don't mean the diorama of a rainforest you built in 6th grade. That was cool. You did a really good job. But by ecosystem modeling, we mean actually like sets of equations and algorithms that we use to model the ecosystem so that we can hypothetically change a variable. You know, if you've got a good enough model of an ecosystem, you can change the variable in that model, and maybe some of the effects you see in the model are the real effects you would see in that real life ecosystem. I mean, that's where it's at, is we want to know what the effects of rising sea levels are going to be, right? We want to know what the effects of all these droughts and wildfires is going to be. And what we have to do that is models of ecosystems, mathematical models. Now, the problem is, if you want to accurately predict what's going to happen when a variable changes, your model has to be really good. You have to put a lot into it. You got to know how energy moves through that ecosystem. The stuff you guys are already good at, who eats who, you know, food webs, that kind of thing. What we'll call trophic levels, which means how many steps away from the sun is your energy source. We want to model all the, like Lauren said, all the symbiotic relationships, how species are influencing each other, which can be obvious in terms of, you know, maybe one's a parasite or predator-prey. It can be less obvious. We got to take living, so we got to take living and non-living things into account. So, you know, things like the minerals, the elements, the chemicals living things need, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, water. All those things naturally cycle into living things and then naturally cycle out into the environment. We got to know exactly how that works to model what's happening in the ecosystem. That's a lot of the stuff we'll be going through in this chapter, is not exactly the math, but how energy does move through an ecosystem and how it gets lost and where it gets spent, and the cycles of non-living things that go through ecosystems that you have to understand to even begin to do a model. And what you need to know beyond that is that it's never perfect. The model that you come up with is always going to have shortcomings. You hope it's good enough. Great example of models failing a lot is Australia. Australia was settled early by the British and has always kind of, well, not always, but since it split off from Pangaea, right, from the supercontinent, it's been the smallest continent and kind of the most isolated continent. And so what it has, lots of cool critters, but a comparatively low diversity. There's not as many different species in Australia as there are in comparable sized, you know, areas of land on other continents. And so it's very sensitive to disturbance. And one of the scenarios you're going to investigate today involves Australia. And I'm going to put you in groups. As soon as you know your group, pick a driver to get into the assignment I just dropped and share the 2 documents that just dropped in. It's a slideshow and a Google Sheet. to share those with your other group members. You all need to be working in the same documents, okay? So here's how the groups break down. You two and Nicholas, you're two behind you. You're gonna go 1, 2, 3. You're with those two, and then 3 and 4. So those are your groups. Go ahead and get in and pick somebody to share, get names straight, and get to the point where you're all looking at the same documents, okay? So this is one of those that's going to span a couple of days. It's going to require some teamwork. And it's one of those I'm going to be checking with my magic Google powers that everybody did their share, right? I can see every keystroke. The basic job is for each scenario, which there are, I think, 7. What this tells you, and it says, this is Australia, early settlers of Australia brought rats with them on their ships. Rats didn't exist in Australia till then, and then it says the number 5 in parentheses. What that 5 means is that in this real life scenario, there were essentially 5 major effects that scenario brought about. And they're somewhere in this list, this long 41 effect list. Your job is to cut and paste. Do you know cut and paste? Control X and Control V are excellent shortcuts to learn for that. Control C is copy. But cut is different from copy in that cut gets rid of the thing where you took it from, and then you paste it somewhere else, which is nice here because you're never going to use any of these twice. There are ones that get used more than once, but if they do, then they're here more than once. So for example, let's see, overpopulated herbivores eat too much vegetation, I think is in several places here. They're there the number of times you're probably going to use them. Okay, so this is not something you're just going to find in your textbook. You're going to have to do some maybe internet searching. It's great. These are all real life scenarios. They're all things that have happened or are happening. And so, you can find stuff about this. But then there's also going to be kind of reasoning and critical thinking and talking to each other. What I want is each slide to be, have the right number of effects pasted in and then be the right effect. I'd also like whenever there is a chronology, what I mean is whenever there's a natural order in time that these things would happen, like this thing would happen and then this thing and then this thing, have them in the right order. There are times it won't matter. But there are times where it's very clear that, this is effect number 1 and that brings about effect number 2 and so on. Have a chronological order if it exists. You have multiple team members, so you talk to each other, make sure you agree on these things, okay? It's okay to split things up a little bit, but you want to make sure that you're all agreeing on what's going on. We're looking at by Friday, you guys are going to be presenting what you've done. And basically each group is going to get one of these scenarios to present to the larger group, but you're not going to know which one. Okay, so you're going to need to have all of them done well. Any questions? The period is yours to get started. Okay, remote folks, this will not be a group project for you. Your deal is that you are going to get a certain portion of these slides, not all of them. I think I'll do it based on what your last name starts with. So look in the assignment and it should tell you, I'll put it in the instructions, which number of slides that you should be. Okay? All right, have a good day.